Representative of Indonesia, I give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We would like to thank Mark Lowcock for his briefing on the humanitarian situation in Syria. We share the concerns about the situation in the Idlib de-escalation zone, a territory which de facto has come under the control of the fighters from the allied with Nusra HTS because of the closing of ranks of the moderate armed opposition. There is an increase of violations of the ceasefire regime. When the Russian-Turkish memorandum was signed on the 17th of September 2018, since then there have been about 1,000 cases reported, as a result of which 65 people have died and more than 200 have been injured. Right from the start, we said that freezing, so to speak, the situation where there are terrorists is something that is not sustainable in the long term. This approach cannot be viewed as a long-term and sustainable option to protect the local population. Unfortunately, developments in the situation confirms that our views were right. In this regard, after the talks between the Russian and Turkish leaders in Moscow on the 23rd of January, work was stepped up to develop effective, feasible and agreed-upon measures regarding the Idlib de-escalation zone. Apart from this, during the Russian-Turkish summit, discussions were conducted on interaction in the northeast of Syria. This includes harnessing the potential of existing bilateral legal bases for the Turkish-Syrian counter-terrorist work. Our position remains unchanged. The best solution for stabilizing the situation in the northwest or the northeast of Syria involves transferring these territories to under the control of the legitimate authorities of the Syrian Arab Republic. This will benefit not only Syria, but will decrease the concerns of neighboring countries in terms of protecting their national security. Stabilization is a necessary precondition to make serious progress on the humanitarian front. It's necessary for the Syrians themselves to be able to return to normal life, and also it's necessary to prevent a situation whereby normal people start to feel kinship with terrorists. Therefore, there's a need for joint work to improve the difficult socio and economic situation in the country, to rebuild what was destroyed by the terrorists, and to provide the right of refugees and IDPs to return to their homes. We consider as a very basically it's lacking in ethics to have a selective approach to providing assistance to the Syrian population. A politicization of humanitarian assistance is unacceptable. We mustn't just blame the Syrian government and prefer to ignore, for example, what happened in Raqqa or what is currently happening in Rukban. Russia, despite a number of complaints as to how humanitarian assistance is being conducted in Syria, is always prepared to find compromise initiatives that will help the population, as was the case with the extension of the cross-border assistance mechanism and the organization of humanitarian convoys in Rukban. And this is the same with the second humanitarian convoy in Rukban as well. Despite the fact that basically the humanitarian situation in Syria remains difficult, we cannot deny that there have been some positive trends. Renewed statistics of OCHA confirm this. In the region that have been stabilized and liberated from terrorists, normal life is returning. This is understood by the Syrian refugees who are deciding to voluntarily return home. This is sustainable in nature, this process, with the assistance of the Russian Center on the Reconciliation of Opposing Sides. Work is being carried out in dozens of crossing points. In tens of crossing points, including one aerial one called Duvali and one sea one Bayans. Many thousands of people have returned to Syria through these crossing points. Russia continues to provide humanitarian assistance to the Syrian people on a non-politicized basis. From the beginning of the settlement process, the Russian Center on the Reconciliation of Opposing Sides have conducted 2,052 humanitarian actions, and the amount of humanitarian goods is 3.238.5 million tons. Assistance is being provided to rebuild infrastructure and to provide conditions for the return of refugees. On the 27th of January 2019, 31,117 homes were built, 726 schools and 134 medical facilities. 986 kilometres of roads have been repaired. We trust that those who really are concerned about the fate of normal Syrians will shortly be able to refrain from propagandist agendas and unilateral policies of sanctions, and will confirm efforts to rebuild the destruction and to build normal life for people. Mr. President, along with the humanitarian and de-escalation efforts, and along with the Turkish and Iranian partners we have, and in coordination with the Syrians and the UN, we're continuing our painstaking work on the political track and to launch the Constitutional Committee in Geneva. The visit of the Special Envoy, Mr. Pedersen, to Moscow on the 21st of January, and his negotiations with Mr. Lavrov, the Foreign Minister, and the Defense Minister Shoigu, confirmed the desire to continue to have a political process. So this would be the political process in Syria with the assistance of the UN. We're convinced that another meeting of the Astana guarantors in the middle of February will give further impetus to Syrian settlement. We urge all those who really want to see peace return to Syria to constructively be involved in our efforts. The only path is honest cooperation. Any attempts to impose any opinion on the special envoy or talk Arab countries out of normalizing relations with Damascus is counterproductive. Thank you very much indeed.
I'd like to thank the representative of the Russian Federation.